Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some adult fantasy recommendations that are not Sanderson. So most of you know I'm a huge fan of Sanderson. I have a lot of videos dedicated to his books, or sometimes I'm composing music for his books, or I'm drawing fan art for his books. I just really like his books, right? And I know that I spent a lot of time talking about Sanderson. I know a lot of people on BookTube spend a lot of time talking about Sanderson, and a lot of you are like, can I get some other recommendations? Or you've read a lot of Sanderson and you're looking to read something else. So that's the point of this video series. I have a part 1 that I did, and I let all of you know, hey, this list is really big. If you would like me to do multiple parts to it, I will gladly do that. And a lot of you said that you would really appreciate that. So that's what we're going to be doing today. If you don't know, I am perfectly okay recommending books that didn't personally work for me, because hopefully you'll hear about it and you know your own reading tastes, and then you'll be able to discern whether or not that sounds like something that you would enjoy. Life's just too short for me to try to, be like, only read the things I like. All of that said, the first book on the list is Foundry Sites. So the funny part is I have actually seen this book compared to Mistborn for if you like Mistborn, try this book out. This is a story that is kind of a blend of both fantasy and sci-fi, because the magic system in some ways feels scientific in a sense. The way that the magic works is that you can essentially code objects to believe that their reality is different from what it is. And an example that you get early on is that you can tell these wheels you are moving because the wind is blowing. And so these objects that otherwise don't really have any sentience, they now have this idea that oh, well, the wind is affecting me, I have to move. And not everybody can make these commands. There's only some people that can, and it's a very difficult, complex thing. There is a group of people who you see them apart and then you see them together. It's kind of a ragtag group of people that band together because there is one particular item that a character finds. This character is a thief, kind of the street urchin character type that you find in fantasy. And this character ends up taking on a job to steal something that is a lot more powerful than they expected, because this object has the ability to break anything's coding, basically. I don't want to say too much. If you like a really interesting magic system, I highly recommend this one, because it definitely is. Also, this story has an interesting tone to it, because it doesn't take itself too seriously, which is something I think a lot of people who are fans of this series really like about it. Kind of going in a completely different direction here. Next up we have Jade City. So with Jade City, the magic system doesn't really feel like a magic system in a way. It almost feels more of like a drug problem in society, because the way the magic works, it has to do with Jade, and then some people can sort of pull from Jade and have various different abilities, and it makes Jade very valuable, but then other people, they can't really handle Jade, and you see that throughout the book, and it's fitting so well to the setting itself, which is more so of a crime. When you think like a mafia movie and you think a crime family, that kind of a feeling, that's the feeling you get with this family. And it explores, I think, the crime family who's actually really powerful and holds a lot of influence in society. It explores, I don't mean this negatively, it explores the more boring side of that, but I say that with love, I swear, because a lot of times I think that movies and television shows have made the crime family into just, there's people killing each other all the time, and there's violence everywhere, and everybody's always getting in fights, and really it's a lot of I'm going to try to influence this politician, and then now I'm going to go meet with this restaurant owner, and now it's like the little things, and it's the little ways in which they hold influence, and then sometimes it's the big ways. And another aspect to the story is that there is a rival crime family, and you see them kind of wanting to expand their territory. Everything I mentioned, a lot of people love that about the series, but on top of that, a lot of people really love the character work in this story, so it's not as fast-paced and action-packed as something like Foundry Side, but if you are somebody who likes a more modern feel to your fantasy stories, and you want something that feels a little bit more realistic, I would say this one is a great one for you. Next up, we have Ninth House. This one falls a little bit also into it's slightly more our world's more realistic. It takes place truly in modern times. So Jade City is not present day, but Ninth House is, and it's a dark academia, which means that we follow a character at a very fancy school that has a secret society that is very dark. So there's some paranormal elements to it. This story is definitely adult. It explores some very traumatic things in it, but I've seen it sold not in fantasy and just sold in fiction, and I was surprised, but then I thought about it, I'm like, that kind of makes sense. So even though there are fantastical elements to it, it does read like a creepy, almost horror type of story. So our main character is very edgy. She's got a chip on her shoulder, and in typical Leigh Bardugo fashion, you do start to see why she is the way she is, and it's done in a masterful way. I think Leigh Bardugo writes backstories really well, and she's able to dive into characters and really explore what makes people who they are, and I think she did that really well in this story. It is a fractured timeline, and it can be a little confusing at times for some people. It's also very detail-oriented, but for fans of this story, I think that works in the book's favor, because if you like the dark academia feel, you probably will eat up all of those details of what it's like being on the campus, and now she's walking alone, and it's dark at night, and plus the kind of ghost aspect of the story is very truly frightening. It's definitely not Casper. Another one that's actually pretty darn terrifying, but in a different way, would be Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So I mentioned loving Spinning Silver in the part 1 that I did of this. I did not love Uprooted, and somebody actually said they really like that about this author, that she is able to write 2 stories that are very different from one another, because it just shows how much she's got up her sleeve, her abilities as an author. And I think also I agree with that. It's really cool. So even though Uprooted didn't work for me and Spinning Silver I liked, some people don't like Spinning Silver and love Uprooted. Some people love both. But either way, this is scary more so in a creepy forest way. It's very folklore inspired, but grim, dark kind of folklore. And there's this forest that these people live near, and the forest is scary. That's a really silly way to put it, but it's a scary forest, and it does really gross things to people. And to keep them safe from this forest, I'm going to say sacrifice. They don't kill someone, but they kind of give a girl from their village to this wizard who lives in this tower, and that's kind of their sacrifice for the wizard to keep them safe. And they don't know a whole lot of what goes down with the wizard and the girl, but eventually the girls come out of it like, I mean, it was fine. Like, they don't seem too bothered by it. They don't seem like he seemed like a terrible person. And so we follow a character who is then given to this wizard, and he's not very nice to her, and you're like, what's going on? So you're not only kind of getting an in as to what it's like with this wizard and what's going on, but you start to see more of the magic, and our character goes beyond just, she doesn't want this cycle to continue. She wants to finally be rid of these dark influences of the forest, and so you kind of explore what that's like. If you're a fan of folklore stories, I think you'll really, really like this one. Next up, this is very popular, but I had to mention it, even though you probably already know about it, and that would be A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I know everybody knows about this series already. It's consistently an Amazon top seller, but I still feel like I had to mention it because, first off, it's pretty different from Sanderson books, I'll say that. But also, if you're somebody who does like your fantasy stories to more so be romance with fantasy as the setting, check this series out. I mean, it's got fae, it's got sexy fae, and it's got people, falling in love and doing stuff to each other. Last on the list would be Malice. So this is a story where, you know how a lot of us know Sanderson has really interesting magic systems, or he takes a trope and he's like, well, but what if actually it was like this, and he does something different. I feel like what makes Malice kind of cool is that Malice is like, what if I took a bunch of the tropes that you've seen in fantasy a lot of times? What if I took those tropes, but I put my own spin on them? It's not so much I'm going to transform this trope into something else. You have the classic kind of ultimate evil versus ultimate good. We have prophecies of characters. You have giants. You have the boy who's just a boy, and he's just, he's an average kid or whatever. And so you're getting a lot of the things that you've seen in fantasy before, but then he puts a lot more into it, and he explores a bunch of different views within the ultimate good, ultimate evil type of setup. So I know from people who have continued on that they love the way that everything intertwines, the way the battles come together. It's so edge of your seat. The way that characters who did originally seem like just whatever characters start to come into their own. There's also an animal companion aspect to the story. So if you're just looking for kind of a classic, this is the fantasy I know and love, but you don't want it to be literally the exact same thing, you just want it to feel familiar, feel cozy, this is the series for you. I will have any relevant information in the description bar down below, so any individual book reviews or purchase links to these, part 1 to this video. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you have other recommendations that you would like to leave in the comments, please feel free. I will be happily doing more of these in the future. Hopefully you get some recommendations out of these. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.